Let's make a VR game together, and in this new episode we are going to learn how we can let the player move freely in our VR world with continuous movement, turn and teleportation. Now as always, feel free to subscribe down below for the next episode about Socket Interactor and using a button. But if you'd like to support my work and get access to the Result Unity project, I will leave in the description my Patreon. But without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so here we are where we were left at the end of last episode. So if you remember, in the previous video, we were able to destroy this meteoroid with the gun over there. And what this has made is spawn this little energy cube. And so, spoiler alert, one of the next interactions that we will be able to make is to analyze this little cube by moving it somewhere else in the scene right there. But unfortunately, to go from this point where the player is currently to another place in the scene, it is a bit far for the player to simply walk. So what we can do is, of course, use one of VR main locomotion system. So let me just press on Ctrl Z to re-disable this energy. And anyway, now we have two main locomotion systems in VR. We have continuous movement and teleportation. And now what I'm going to do in this video is show you a setup that makes them both work with the same VR rig. And so first, let's start with the continuous movement, which is the simplest to do. And so to enable any locomotion in your game, we need to search for here a locomotion system that we can add. Now, as you can see, it needs an XR origin, so we can basically drag this component over there. Now it's time to enable the continuous movement. So for this, let's click on Add Component and search for Dynamic Move Provider. Now, as you can see, it needs a locomotion system that we added earlier, so let's drag it over there. And now you can see a bunch of settings that the dynamic move provider is using to, well, move the player. We have here the movement speed to say at which velocity the player is moving. Now, I believe that 1 is plenty enough. Enable strap is to make the player move left or right. Here we have gravity application mode, which is set currently to attempting move, which means that gravity will only apply when we are trying to move. Now, personally, what I like to do is set it not to attempting move, but to immediately, which will mean that gravity is always happening on the player at any given time. Okay, so for the forward source, this is the direction in which the player is moving. So the big thing, in my opinion, is to go here and select main camera and to set the main camera direction to be the forward source. There you go. Now here we will be able to set the input action that will set the input to enable the dynamic movement. So what we can do is click here on use reference and then here and search for move. And as you can see, we have here directly the XRI left hand locomotion move. Now if we double click on this action, here is the list of our action. And as you can see, if we go down below, we can have a look at the action that is assigned for the move input action, which is, in our case, the primary 2D axis, so the left thumbstick. So, of course, if you want to use another action to move the player, you can do so here, but I think that by default, it is pretty great to have the left thumbstick working for this movement. Now, anyway, we could also do the same for the right hand, but I particularly like to reserve the right hand to rotate and the left hand to move with the joystick. Now, anyway, we can also set here the head transform as well as the left and right controller. So let's drag here the main camera for the head transform, the left controller for the left controller, and the right controller for the right controller. And everything is now set up on the dynamic move providers. But to enable continuous movement, we of course need a character controller. So let's click on Add Component, search for character controller, and here it is. Now, basically, what this component is, it is a capsule collider, which is making it possible to kind of move stairs, move slope, and kind of better handle the movement of the character. As you can see, for example, you have here the slope limit, so 45 degrees in my case, which means that any slope above this angle will not be able to be passed by the player. Here, the step offset means that any step that is higher than 0.3 will be considered as a wall. And anyway, the parameters that interest us in our case is here the radius. As you can see, the radius is a bit big in our case, as it is 0.5. So let's set it instead to 0.1. Perfect. Now for the height, let's set it to 1. And for the center, let's set it to 0.5. 0.5 on the y-axis. And as you can see, this will make it so that the start of the character controller will begin here at the ground, so at the starting position of the XR origin, which is what we want. Now, anyway, everything is now ready. Let's see if this works by clicking on play. Okay, so here we are, guys. I'm in VR and now I can move my hands and everything, but let's try to press on the left thumbsticks to see if we move. And as you can see, it is working. I can now move in all directions simply by setting the direction in which I want to move with the thumbstick. So it is working well. And now, of course, you can tweak the settings and maybe change the speed of the movement to something higher or lower, depending on what you are trying to achieve. But something that I want to fix is that if here I unmaximize these windows and that I select here all player, as you can see, the capsule collider is always following the center of the play area. But unfortunately, if the players move left to right, the capsule does not work. Which means that, for example, if I go near a wall right there and that I move my head inside, as you can see, I can pass it. Now, only the way to fix this is to actually update here the center of the capsule collider on the character controller to follow the head. And so let's leave play mode to fix this. And here in the XR origin, we are going to search for the character controller driver. We can set the dynamic move provider here. There you go. And as you can see, we have a min height and a max height, which will be able to set here the maximum height that the capsule collider can have. But without further ado, let me click on play to show you what this component does. Okay, and here you go. Now I think that this is pretty straightforward. As you can see now, even if I move my head left or right, the capsule collider follows exactly the position of my body and keeps updating to take into action the movement of my head. For example, if I try to get lower, it will update the height of the character controller. And the same goes when I try to stand up. Anyway, and this means that we will have a better and more precise collision with our world by moving around. So, for example, if I go to the side here, as you can see, I cannot pass with my head the wall like it was the case before. Okay, so this concludes the continuous movement. So now, of course, the next question is, how can we use something similar, not to move, but to turn? And so we have two ways of doing this. We have the continuous turn and the snap turn, which basically does the same, but instead of doing a continuous movement, we'll turn the player directly to a certain amount of degrees, like a quarter of turn, for example. Now, these are basically really easy to set up. So, for example, for the continuous turn, let's click on Add Component and search for Continuous Turn Provider Action Based. There it is. We can drag the locomotion system again here. There is the turn speed over there, and we can set the input action like earlier. So, in my case, I want to click on Use Reference here and search on Right Turn. And there it is. We have the right hand locomotion turn. And now, as you can see, if I go to the input action, you can see that this uses the right touchpad on the right controller. Now, anyway, you can do something similar for the snap turn by adding not a continuous turn provider, but a snap turn provider. There it is. Again, let's drag the locomotion system here. We have the turn amount, which has the rotation degrees that will be applied to rotate the players. And we can set again the same input action by going here and do snap turn on the right hand. There you go. And now basically you can choose which turn type you want to add for a player, continuous or snap. In my case, so this is just a personal preference, I just prefer to use the continuous turn provider. I don't know why. So in my case, I will simply disable this one. But you can, of course, let the player choose which turn system he wants to use in a menu. And that's something that we can, of course, talk a little bit later in this tutorial series. Now, anyway, let me click on play to find out if we can, of course, turn with the right touchpad. And there you go. As you can see, in a matter of a few seconds, we are now able to move around our beautiful scene and even turn with both joysticks. This is really great. And just to give you kind of an example on the other turn method, if I go now to the XR origin and disable the continuous to enable the snap, now there you go. I should be able to rotate a quarter of a turn every time that I press on the touchpad. And as you can see, this is working well as well. Okay, so at this point we learn about continuous movement and about turning. So of course the next logic step is to learn the second big locomotion system, which is the teleportation. So for the teleportation, like we did for the dynamic move provider, we need to go to the XR origin and click on add component. And here I'm going to add a teleportation provider. There you go. Now, as you can see, it needs a reference to the locomotion system that we can find above. So let's drag it over there. But now there are two things missing for our teleportation. We need a ray to point to where we want to teleport, and we want to have a teleport destination. Now for the teleport ray, we could make it like we did for here, the right direct interactor, but instead it will be a right ray interactor. But lucky for us, if we go to samples, XR interaction, the version that we have, and then to prefab interactor, we can see here directly a teleport interactor already set up for us that we will be able to drag under the right controller. But before doing this, now if we go to the interaction layer mask, as you can see right now, there is no layer mask set for the XR ray interactor, which means that it will not be able to interact with anything. And that's something that we can fix by simply going here, add layer, and add a teleport layer. Now, by default, the XR interaction toolkit really likes you to put a teleport layer here on the 31 used layer. And you can actually find this if we go to Edit, Project Settings, then on XR Plugin Management, Project Validation. As you can see, if you have not set the 31 layer to be teleport, you will have this warning here asking you to do so. So we can, of course, simply write teleport here, or here, if I click on fix and wait a little bit, as you can see, it does this automatically. And now if I close this windows, go back to the interactor, teleport interactor prefab, as you can see now, the interaction layer mask is set to teleport. So perfect. Now we can simply drag it under the right controller, and I'm going to rename it right teleport interactor. There you go. Now let's click on play to find out what this looks like. Okay, here you go. So apparently it is working because we now have a red ray coming out of our right hand. But of course the ray is red because there is no teleport destination that we can point to. So let's see how we can fix this. Okay, so there are basically two teleport destinations that we can make, the teleportation Encore and the teleportation area. Now the teleportation Encore is the first one that we are going to make, and this one actually forces a certain position and direction when you are teleported to, which is not the case for the teleportation area, which are large area that you can teleport. Now, anyway, again, we can find a prefab for the teleportation area by going to Sample, XR Interaction Toolkit. But this time on prefab, go to Teleport, and there it is. We have here the Teleport Encore that we can drag somewhere in our game. For example, here, looks nice. And now let's click on play to see what this looks like. And there you go. This exactly shows what I told you about just a minute ago. Now we have a valid zone that we can point to. And as you can see, it directly set a certain direction on my left, right there. And now, if we want to teleport, we simply need to press on the select button, which is in our case, the grip button on the right controller. So let's do so. And there you go. Now, as you can see, it has currently teleported me to this position and made me look at this direction. But in the case of my game, I don't want to use a teleport Encore because I want the player to freely be able to move here and be able to teleport anywhere on the ground. So what I'm going to do is simply disable here the teleport Encore. You can, of course, use it in your game, but personally, what I'm going to do is add a teleport area. So to do so, what we can do is right-click here, create empty, and create a teleport area. We can reset here the position and add as a component the teleport area. There you go. So the only thing that we want to set up on this component is, of course, the interaction layer mask that needs to be set to teleport as well. And we can set it before to nothing, then to teleport to only have the teleport layer mask here. And now the last thing is to, of course, set the colliders that we can teleport to. Now, in the case of this game, there are 3 colliders that we can teleport. there is the collider on this ground, and finally on this ground, which are here all located under static environment and which are the 3 floor 2 that we have, and here the floor 5. So what we can do is simply drag here the floor 2 to the colliders list, and as you can see, it has added here. Do this with the second floor that we have, and there you go. Now with this, we have the 3 floor collider that are listed in the collider list of our teleportation area. And so this means that the 3 collider will be potentially be used to teleport to. But of course, let's find out if this works by clicking on play. And there you go. As you can see, it seems to work because now I can point to any floor position that I want. And if I press on the grip button, it correctly teleports me to the good position. But now I want to improve here this teleportation system in 2 ways. The first one is that, as you can see, there is a certain reticle here that points to a certain direction. And actually, what could be great is to be able to control the direction that we want to be teleported to using the thumbstick. Finally, what I want is not be able to teleport using the grip button, but simply by pointing the thumbstick forward. And so let's see how we can tweak the input action for teleportation to be able to do all of this. Okay, so to be able to control the direction in which we want to teleport to, what we need is simply to go in our teleport area, and here on the teleportation configuration, you need to enable the match directional input. By doing so, now if we click on play, as you can see, if we press on the grip button but keep it pressed, and that in the same time we use the thumbstick, as you can see, we can set here a certain direction that we want to be teleported to. So for example, I can point in the direction of this shelf and I will be directly teleported in front of it, which I think can be pretty useful. But what is annoying now is that we are using the grip button to teleport, which is not that good because we want to use the grip button not to teleport but to grab objects. So to override the input action, what we can do is go to our right teleport interactor and simply add an XR controller action base. Now by default, the XR ray interactor that is used to teleport, if there is no XR controller on this game object, he will use the one on the parent, which is this one right there. Now this one right there is using all the action that are seen over there. So to sum up, the grip button to select and the trigger button to activate. And to simply override, what we can do is use here this new XR controller that we made. We can set it up like the other one, so like the right controller. But what we can do is not use any position, rotation, and track movement. So I'm going to disable them all because we don't want this game object to move. And finally, replace here the select action. And so to do so, I'm going to click here and search for teleport. And as you can see, by default, we already have a teleport select that we can enable. And I'm going to set this input action as well on the select action value. So let's click again here, search for teleport and set the right and teleport select over there. And there you go. This way, this will override the input action that is used on the XR ray interactor to teleport. Oh, and by default, if you wonder what this teleport select action is used with, if we double click on it, as you can see, what it is using is actually here the primary 2D axis on the right hand, so basically the right touchpad. Okay, and here you go. Now, as you can see, this works. We can now use the touchpad to teleport. But as you can see, there is a little bit of an annoying thing, is that there is now a controller prefab on the right hand, which is not that hard to fix. But which is annoying is that we also are using the right touchpad to rotate. So basically, we have one action that is used to 2 different things. So let me show you how we can fix this. So first, for the controller, we can simply go under the right teleport interactor. And here for the model prefab, we can click here and set it to none. Perfect. Okay, and now for the issue that we have with the right teleport interactor, which is set on the same input action as the rotate, let me show you a fix that is amazing and will prevent any overlap with the teleportation. Now, I guess by now you are starting to understand how annoying the teleportation can be if not done properly. And I think that this solution, which is now possible with the latest version of the Unity XR toolkit, does a pretty good job at making it work really well. Now, for this particular solution, what we want to do is go on the right controller parent, and at the top, I'm going to add an XR interaction group. There you go. So on the XR interaction group, I'm going to click on plus 2 times and drag there our right teleport interactor for the first one and the right direct interactor for the second one. But what is this XR interaction group? Now, this is a great component that was made recently by Unity. And basically, the purpose of this component is to make sure that only one interactor at a time can interact on this group. So by doing the setup that we made, which is adding both the teleport interactor and the right direct interactor, it will not make it possible for the player to hold an object and be able to teleport as well at the same time, which is something that I think can help prevent a lot of bugs. But that's not it. Now, the other component that we are going to add is an action-based controller manager. Now, as you can see, there are plenty of things to add on this game object. And this action-based controller manager is basically a component that will be able to better handle the interaction on the right controller. For example, it will only show the ray when we are pressing on the ray activation button, and it will block all of the other locomotion at the same time. So anyway, to set up the action-based controller manager, we want to drag the XR interaction group over there. The direct interactor, we can drag here or right direct interactor. As you can see, there is a setting for a ray interactor, which we don't have currently in our game right now. So let's skip it. And let's drag here the right teleport interactor for the teleport interactor. Now, there is a bunch of input action that we can add here. So for the teleport mode activate, let's click here and search for teleport activate and set it to be the right hand teleport activate. Do the same for teleport cancel with the right hand teleport cancel. For the turn, we can add the right turn. For the snap turn, the right snap turn. For the move, the right move. And finally, for the UI scroll, we can search for scroll and set it to the right hand UI scroll. And beautiful, now everything is set up. There is only one thing that we can look. As you can see, there is a setting to set the locomotion settings that we want to use on the XR controller. So basically, is the XR controller using a smooth motion or a smooth turn? And in our case, we want to use a smooth turn. So let's enable it over there. And there you go. This way, everything should be now set up. And this should make the teleportation and the turning work separately, and also only shows the teleportation when we press on the activation button. But one way to find out, and it is to click on play. And there you go. Now, as you can see, first thing first, there is no ray coming out of my right hand right now. I can still move with the left joystick and rotate with the right joystick. But when I point the right joystick forward, as you can see, I now have a ray showing, and I can then point a certain direction that I want to teleport to. And if I release the right joystick, I am indeed teleported to the good direction. So now everything is working, and with both having the continuous movement and the teleportation working at the same time, which I think really works great. And this means that we have now succeeded to make the locomotion system of our game work. And there you go, guys. Continuous movement was easy, but as you guessed, the teleportation is a bit more complicated, but the result is worth it. Now, the next episode is about socket interactor and using a button, so make sure to subscribe down below. And if you'd like to support my work and get access to the Result Unity project, I will leave my Patreon in the description. Thank you for watching and see you soon. Bye bye.